Joining me now is Aaron Regunberg. He is running for lieutenant governor in Rhode Island, and there are several strange things about his race that I want to ask him about. Aaron, first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Aaron, let me start with strange situation number one. You're running against a Democratic incumbent. You've got the backing of Just Democrats, Indivisible, Our Revolution Rhode Island, National Our Revolution, Working Families Party. So far, not strange. You're very progressive, you're young, you're an upstart, you've got all these progressive groups behind you. But what's strange is you also have Planned Parenthood, Now, Sierra Club, Clean Water Action, etc., 350.org. And those are not groups I normally see jumping into a race against a Democratic incumbent. So what in the world's going on over there?
Well, in Rhode Island, we're sometimes a special situation. You know, Rhode Island is one of the most democratic states in the country. And so we can really be a model for the kind of bold, positive, progressive agenda and what that can accomplish. The problem is that even though in our state house machine, everyone's a Democrat, we've got Democratic supermajorities in both the House and the Senate, it really doesn't mean anything. You know, we've got Democratic leaders at the highest levels of our party who are, have an A+ from the NRA, have an A+ from Right to Life, are anti-union, don't believe in climate change. And so the battle here in our state is, it's sort of fundamentally, are we going to have leadership that's actually going to stand up for our core values, who's going to push for that bold progressive agenda? You know, I've been proud to introduce legislation every year that I've been a state rep to create a universal Medicare for all system at the state level, to push for a living wage, to push for bold climate action. But the battle is also just to get our state Democrats to stand up for the most basic democratic values and agendas, to fight to protect a woman's right to choose, to fight for common sense gun violence legislation. So really the lines here couldn't be clearer. And what we're trying to do in this campaign is really send a message to that conservative state house machine that Rhode Islanders want to see some real change. They want Democratic leaders that are actually going to stand up for working families. And there's a disconnect there between what everyday Rhode Islanders want to see and what our current sort of old boys club in the state house has been putting forward.
So let's talk about your particular incumbent in the first place. Dan McKee, he's the lieutenant governor, he's a Democrat, but he must be awfully conservative for Now and Planned Parenthood and Sierra Club to jump in on this one. So what makes him that conservative as a Democrat?
So there are some really, really clear contrasts in this race. I've really fought to pass protections for working families in our state. I led the fight to get paid sick days passed, to get the first increase for the tip minimum wage passed. My opponent, Dan McKee, he's sided with corporate lobbyists against all of those measures. He's received hundreds of thousands of dollars in spending from, out-of-state millionaires and billionaires like Alice Walton of the Walmart family, like Jonathan Sackler of Purdue Pharma. Those are the folks behind the OxyContin crisis. Like just this week, 2 Wall Street millionaires dropped $75,000 into a super PAC to support my opponent, which in Rhode Island, that's a lot of money. So the difference is, I would say this race isn't just between, someone who's been really pushing for that bolder progressive agenda and a mainstream Democrat. It's between, that bold agenda and really a conservative, sort of old school part of that machine that we have in our state house that needs to go. Because when I talk to everyday Rhode Islanders, overwhelmingly, they want to see their state leaders fight for universal health care as a right for everyone. They believe that no one who's working full-time should live in poverty. They believe that we should be taking bold climate action to really take clean energy in our state to scale. We've just got this bubble in our state house where even though they're Democrats, they're listening to corporate lobbyists and entrenched corporate interests. And I think that with this election cycle, we really have the opportunity to shake that up, to send a message to all those politicians that we're ready for change. And ultimately, I think Rhode Island can be, a model for what that bolder agenda can look like.
Yeah, so I'm telling you, Aaron's coalition of the willing, if you will, it's not a great analogy, but is fascinating. You've got almost all the unions on your side, which progressive upstarts don't normally have. But you were on Bernie Sanders' you were a delegate for him in 2016. So it's a really unique combination. And speaking of which, I mentioned you were 28 years old, but you're already a state representative for District 4 over there, and you got there in 2014. If I'm doing the math right, you won when you were 24 years old. So what possessed you to get into politics as a 24-year-old in the first place?
Well, I got involved in politics through community organizing. I founded a citywide nonprofit in Providence called the Providence Student Union that helps young people come together and really organize and fight for the changes that they want to see in their public schools. And so I saw through that work that, people can come together and win real change, and how much better policy outcomes are when the folks that are impacted by them actually have a seat at the table. And so that led me to wanting to make sure that there were folks at that table that were going to bring in those new voices. So that's what I've tried to do as a rep. I think that when you talk about the coalition we've been able to build in this campaign, my approach has always been, I want to win, and you win by building the kind of coalitions that have enough political capital to actually get things over the finish line. And so it's been working to build relationships with labor, getting out to every picket line, showing that you're going to stand up for them, so that when you've got a policy like, trying to pass paid sick time that might not impact as many of their workers, but they'll come there to the table to fight for the broader, world of working families in our state.
Yeah, actually, that's what I wanted to ask you about next. So I'm glad you mentioned that. You led the fight to guarantee paid sick days in Rhode Island. So talk to me about how that went down. Was there originally skepticism? It's not practical. We can't afford it, et cetera. And how did you guys get past it and get it passed?
So there were a lot of powerful corporate interests that did everything they could to fight against this. And so the approach for me was, number one, build that diverse coalition. So make sure that we had labor, make sure that we had women's groups, make sure that we had domestic violence groups, because the legislation also includes sick time for folks going through those really difficult periods. And number two, ultimately, I think on all of these fights, it's about making sure that politicians are more scared of us, of regular people who are fighting for the protections that they need and deserve, than they are scared of the corporate lobbyists and attorneys. So we knocked on doors. We had literally close to 10,000 Rhode Islanders make phone calls and write their legislators in specific targeted districts to show the folks that, again, they're mostly hearing from corporate lobbyists, so they're hearing this is bad, this is going to kill business. Of course, we know that actually everyone benefits when workers are coming in healthy, when they're not getting their coworkers sick, when they're not getting their customers sick. But they knew that even though they were hearing that from the powerful interests, their actual voters, the people in their communities, were calling them up and saying, "Are you kidding me? You don't support this most basic right of letting me not have to send my kid to school sick, of not making me choose between my job and caring for my elderly loved one when they have a spill." Yeah. So in all of these fights, I think whether we're talking about Medicare for all, whether we're talking about the actual climate action we need to get to 100% clean energy, it's going to come out of building power in our communities. We know that they're always going to have the money, but we've got people, and when you organize them, when you bring them together, we can do really good things. And to me, that's what the Lieutenant Governor's office in Rhode Island can be. I'm so glad to be on this show because the phrase that I use about what the Lieutenant Governor's office can be is a little rebel base camp, a rebel headquarters right in our state house that our movement can use to organize out of, that we can use to support the good folks who are in the General Assembly, to have some more staffing, some more capacity to build those bigger coalitions we need to get more ambitious policy change passed.
Now you call the Lieutenant Governor's office in Rhode Island rebel headquarters, and I will have my lawyers contact you immediately.
Okay.
No, we're kidding around. Look, there's a lot of reasons to like you, Aaron. You're a just Democrat. You're a young progressive fighting for the voters, et cetera. But now I got another one, because you do hand motions like my dad. 10,000 people called in. Okay, I wouldn't have known if you hadn't done this.
My team is always telling me you got to stop using your hands so much, so I'm trying. But
no. Do whatever's natural. Don't listen to your team. Okay, so anyway, one more thing, at least. You got an F from a group that I don't normally see that on someone's resume. Hey, I got an F, okay? It was from the NRA. So how'd you earn that F?
So every year that I've been in elected office, I've introduced legislation to ban high-capacity magazines in our state. I helped pass legislation to disarm domestic abusers. This is one of those issues where the vast majority of Rhode Islanders support common sense gun violence prevention. And yet our Speaker of the House, again, in a Democratic supermajority chamber, has an A+ from the NRA. So the gun lobby, even though you think Rhode Island is very blue, the gun lobby here is very powerful. And so what I'm trying to do in our campaign is show that even though you have an F from the NRA, you can still win statewide. And so I think if we're successful, it's going to send a message to other elected officials. It's going to show them that they don't have to be beholden to these corporate interests. My campaign's not taking a dime from corporate PACs. We're not taking a dime from the oil and gas industry, from drug manufacturers, from the gun lobby. We're not going to have the out-of-state millionaires and billionaires like my opponent has. But I think that we can win without that. We can win with actual grassroots organizing, and we're gonna let other elected officials in our state know that that's the way that they can have success as well.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't think that Walmart and Purdue Pharma are looking out for the best interests of Rhode Island, but or perhaps that's a great point. We're out of time. I want to make sure everybody's got your website. AaronRegunberg.com, AaronRegunberg.com. Links will be down below if you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook. Representative Regunberg, thank you so much for joining us and for fighting.
Thanks for having me.